Our participants are Kamran Kamal, Shaharyar Nashat, and Saadia Qayyum. Our moderator for this session is Asad Shah. Mr. Asad Shah is Managing Partner, Deloitte, Pakistan, one of the leading professional services firms in the country. He is a board member of International Federation of Accountants, President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan, and Chairman of the 26th session of ISAR, UNCTAD, United Nations, Geneva, Chairman of the Technical Committee which drafted the corporate governance rules for public sector companies in Pakistan. He has also been an advisor to the Chief Minister of Sindh on finance. Sir, I would like you to please thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I think a very small correction. I'm no longer a managing partner of Deloitte now. I left Deloitte about a year back. So these are all my past credentials. Currently, I'm doing a few things on my own, and I'm also chairing Pakistan Refinery Limited. So that is my current connection with the energy sector. So, as you know, today's discussion is on the energy sector, and this has been organized with the help of Hub Power Company. And Hub Power Company, HUBCO, is one of the, it was the largest IPP, independent power project that was established in 90s, the first one that was conceived with the help of World Bank at that time. And I mean, we all know energy is one of the major issue of this country, and we have seen energy problems and energy crisis at least, I think all of us would remember, at least for the last 30 years or 40 years, at least 30 years, because we started having these energy shortages, and the load shedding and the energy problems. I think there is not anybody in this country who has not suffered for that, so I will not go into details of that. And it was actually to address the energy shortages which we started encountering in late 80s that the IPP policy was developed, and HUBCO, which was 1600 megawatt, one of the largest IPP, was established based on the policy that was conceived in 1995, 1994, 95, somewhere like that. So, despite huge investment that has gone in the energy sector, in IPPs, and related power chain like distribution and transmission, unfortunately we still have huge energy problems. One of the big issues that we have is that the entire IPP sector was conceived based on sovereign guarantees by the state, which has created this problem of circular debt. So I'll wait a few minutes for, we have some children from students to settle down, maybe. So, so we have huge issues in the energy sector as we have in our overall economy. And I don't think we have sufficient time, by the way, to discuss all these issues in this short session. But nevertheless, I think an attempt has been made by the organizers in collaboration with HubCode to discuss some of the key issues and to create some awareness about what should be the way forward. So with that background, I will initiate the discussion. We have three panelists today. We have Saadia from World Bank. Saadia is a World Bank specialist in energy. So I think she will be one of the key speaker today, giving us some suggestions, because I think at country level we have not been able to resolve most of our problems, so maybe she'll give us some better ideas. Then we have two gentlemen, Kamran Kamal, who is the Chief Executive of LAREB Energy. And LAREB, interestingly, was also a very innovative project. It was the first IPP in hydro energy, first private sector project, because before this, all the hydro projects have been in the public sector. I think, is there any other one? That's now there are a few others. Yeah, but this was the first innovative project in private sector hydropower project. Then we have Mr. Shaharyar Nashat, who is Director Legal and Public Relations from HubCo. So to start with, because we have people from IPPs and energy capacity, and the cost of energy is a big issue. So I will start with asking my first question to Kamran is, has Pakistan achieved its required power generation capacity? There's been so much investment in the capacity generation. So where are we at the current stage, and where are we likely to be in the next 5 years? If you can respond to this.
Thank you, Asad Saab. Assalamu alaikum. So to address directly the question that everyone in the room has experienced the energy shortage over the last decade, acute energy shortage. So over the past few years, the focus has been on the generation part of, I mean, it is good to report that on the generation deficit, we are now in a surplus situation. Over the last few years, we've seen the addition of various thermal projects and one or two hydro projects as well. We are at this point in time about 36,000 megawatt generation capacity. That includes even the inefficient plants and all those. Whereas, unfortunately, like Asad Saab alluded to, is that our ability to plan properly has resulted in that we cannot transmit or provide electricity more than 27,000 megawatts to the consumers. Now, there were a few principles which were followed over the last few years based on what our needs were. So one was that we should be able to provide sustainable power, which comes usually from baseload power generation. It should be affordable, so they opted for a cheaper generation capacity. So we saw some of the coal plants as well. And there was also an added focus onto the indigenous power generation fuel as well. So which is why we saw the development of Thar coal after almost 25 years of its actual discovery. So over the last few years, we have relied on to imported coal and RLNG. But RLNG, although when you look at a headline number, is a more expensive fuel, but as an electricity conversion, because there are some of the highest efficiency power plants in the world, 62%, so they are reasonably affordable. So we feel that we do have enough capacity now, and in the next 5 years, I think there will be only imported, only thermal fuel will be preferably Thar coal. So we will be moving towards a heavy reliance onto the indigenous resource, which we should be using. And then we would have hydro projects coming online, almost 3,000 plus megawatts, which are already in the development phase or construction phase. So we will be relying in the future, but our capacity would be about 41,000 megawatts at the end of 2023. The challenge which remains, and which we will have to deal with, and as a consumer one has to be concerned about, is our demand catching up to it, or would we be paying for idle capacity? Because retirals of power generation capacity other than the GenCos in the next 3 to 5 years is not as much as the addition. So we have the opportunity to, basically catalyze our development in the industrial growth. Affordability is one question that we will answer in the coming years as well. But I think in terms of the shortage, there's no shortage of electricity as we speak today. Whether you can get it, it's a constraint. That's where.
Just a supplementary question. While there is no shortage, but when I go into to my own hometown, Khairpur in Sindh, or what I hear from other people in the rural areas, there is still, load shedding or power shortages for some reason or the other, ranging from 8 hours to 12 hours, 14 hours. So is it all because of the transmission issues or some other issues? Maybe if you can throw some light on that also. Saadia?
Yes, thank you, sir. So as Kamran was saying, we have the surplus capacity available, but there are still areas that have load shedding. And mostly these are rural consumers and some parts of urban areas as well. Yes, I was saying since 2013, we had a transmission capacity of about 13,000 megawatt, and to 2019 now, we're transmitting around 22,000 megawatts. 27,000 megawatts are actually peak demand. So that's why one part of the problem is that we don't have enough transmission capacity to actually evacuate all the power, and then the distribution end, which is actually deteriorated in the last 5 years. Our combined transmission and distribution losses are 17.9%. That allowed by NEPRA, the regulator, is 15.3%, which is higher than the rest of the world. Because of which, all of this capacity that has been added is not going to reach to the end consumer, and that is what has led to the circular debt. We all know Pakistan has a circular debt of 1.6 trillion rupees. That's around $10 billion. And there are two components of the circular debt. For those of you not know, because we keep on hearing this figure, but why has that circular debt emerged? One is because our cost of electricity was increasing, but at the same time, the government wasn't passing on this cost to the consumer. So there was the government was subsidizing, but these subsidies were not being paid to the distribution companies, and in turn, the IPPs weren't being paid on time. Kamran can talk about it later as well, but the late payment penalty that the government pays to the IPPs because they're not paying on time is KIBOR plus 4%, and recently the KIBOR has gone up. And then there's the two parts of the circular debt. One is 806 billion, which is part with the power holding company, and then there's payable to or liabilities to the IPPs, so 806 and 862 billion adds up to 1600 trillion. The interest that we're paying on this stock of PHPL debt is KIBOR plus 1% if we pay on time, otherwise KIBOR plus 2%. What I'm trying to say is, because of these inefficiencies, we are adding a lot of losses, or in terms of the financial losses to the circular debt every year, and that will have to be eventually paid by the consumer, because the government does not have the pocket to be able to pay for this. And in the last few years, the cost of electricity has gone up and we have a number of surcharges slapped on us, whereas financial cost surcharge, which is basically to pay for the debt that we have on PHPL, whether that's inter-disco tariff rationalization surcharge. So if the disco or the distribution company in the south has high losses, I, as a consumer in Islamabad or Lahore, have to pay for the losses, or in South or in North. That basically is misalignment of incentives, because then the distribution company, which is making losses, does not have the incentive to actually improve their performance, because they know they're going to be bailed out by the government or by the other consumers. And mostly the burden falls on industrial consumer, and that's why our industrial growth, it was projected when all of this capacity was added or planned, the projected demand growth rate was 5%, whereas last year was 2%. It's going to be even low because the economic growth rate has now been forecasted with not more than 2.7 and 2.8%. Yes, I think Pakistan has worked on its supply side, but it needs to work on its transmission, especially distribution side.
Asad, just to add on your Khairpur thing, and Saadia alluded to, so the government has made a decision that if we were to supply to these consumers who are on the fringes or and the node ends of the distribution companies, there are high loss feeders and they already are facing a financial challenge to supply. So the solution is, I mean, not to cut that electricity or blackouts, but rather a governance issue. So until or unless we have a governance issue at the discos level, the consumer in Khairpur, I mean, I assume that number of well-paying customers also suffer, right? So because of the bad ones, and that's a story. Even if you look at any segment in this country, there are tax-paying people and there are non-tax-paying people. So the burden is I mean, onto the tax-paying. So that's how we are looking at it. So the Khairpur or anybody in the rural area, the reason or the rationale or the argument that is given is practically that these are high-loss feeders. But I think the blackout is not a solution when you have excess generation, when you have 20% plus people off the grid. The solution lies into providing more electricity, bringing governance into collection systems, and then basically reducing the burden onto the well-paying urban and industrial consumers, because blackout is going to add to the capacity charges of the consumers who are paying.
So perhaps I think it seems that we are going to highlight, more problems than we are going to solve the problems in this session, because energy sector continues to be, have insurmountable, huge issues. I wish we had some people from the, you talked about governance, which is the key issue. So unless we should have had somebody from policy making and from governance side to talk about it. But yes, it seems that the basic issue remains governance and overall policy. Now my next issue, I think again the gist is that just as both two of you said, that we have actually addressed the shortage issue. We now have, previously we had a shortage issue, now perhaps it's a excess issue maybe. In the process we have created more capacity now. I understand we were discussing that we have now around 27,000 capacity, 36,000 installed capacity, but effective capacity is somehow 27,000, and the demand is probably 22,000 or 27,000. So anyway, but I know that many of the plants have been established which are not operating, but still government has to pay them the capacity charges. I heard few days back that China Hub Power, for instance, is not producing anything, but its capacity is ready and it's being paid, and the Hubco itself, when they stopped producing from furnace oil because of the LNG plants availability, and many other furnace oil plants are paid capacity charges without actually generating anything. And in the next few years, we will have capacity, an additional 5,000 or 6,000 capacity, and it seems that our growth, which was estimated 5%, and I think maybe power demand was estimated even higher, is not growing that much. So the impact of all that is ultimately the cost of electricity in Pakistan is perhaps the highest, right? I mean, overall to the consumers, 20 rupees or 21 rupees, I don't know what is the exact average, but now globally the renewables, the cost of generation of renewables has gone down to 2 cents or 3 cents. Yeah. So what are we going to do with, and in future, as I see, with the technology and battery cost hopefully coming down, the projections that the futurists are making for next 5-10 years, that the power of renewable energy is going to go down very, very significantly. So how is our industry, which is already compete with our other competitors who don't have this kind of issue? So what is the way forward? Do you, I mean, just coming to the gist of it, can we start with you, Shaharyar? Do you have any thoughts, or is it an unfair question to you?
I think when there are a couple of things that Asad, you touched upon, and one of them was capacity charges, and then that obviously translates into the cost of electricity for the end consumer. There are a number of factors that play into this. One is that when you have a certain policy, when that policy is framed, it must be done in an integrated manner. You must, when the government frames their policy, they must keep in mind short-term, medium-term, as well as long-term planning. We had the 1994 policy, we had the 2002 policy, and most recently we had the 2015 policy. And now we have a draft alternative renewable energy policy. What needs to be seen is whether those policies were drafted and then implemented in a manner where the medium term and short term was actually encapsulated or not. It seems that the planning was missing. In 1994 and in 2002, we opted for more expensive fuel mix, but because it could be put up in a shorter time, and then you had investors that were guaranteed certain incentives. They came in and they put up their plants, and for a certain project tenure. Now, that tenure for a lot of those projects is coming to an end. And yes, there are capacity charges attached to those projects, but those will be retired. And then you have new projects now being put up or that have recently been put up, and their capacity charges will come up. So it's like a cycle. When some will be retiring, some new ones will be coming up, and there's a concept of what we call spinning reserves that exists in almost all economies around the world. For example, Malaysia, as a country, they have a policy of having spinning reserves between 25 to 30%. Spinning reserves actually means having excess capacity. So, as we go on in the future as well, where we have excess capacity, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good thing for the economy, because because once the economy starts growing and you have demand, you can't really bring in power plants from abroad or something and just install them and they'll start generating on day one. They have a construction period, they have a gestation period, unless of course we want to go down the RPP model again. So that's one thing. The other thing you touched upon, sir, was on renewables and what the future holds. Renewables, definitely the cost of renewables has certainly come down. I think but when we look at renewables, there are always 3 aspects we must consider. One is technological advancements, which have brought the cost of manufacturing significantly down. As you mentioned, the cost of solar panels, for example, has come down 85% in the last 5 to 7 years. The cost of batteries is coming down as well. But all of those things, bringing them to Pakistan, because we don't have local manufacturing of these things, bringing all those things to Pakistan has a certain cost element. And then on top of that, when we have a renewable energy policy,
we keep getting reminders that the energy is still a big issue.
Yes.
Actually, the distribution, not the generation.
So we need to bear in mind, how does the renewable energy, or whatever we're going to do, we talk about 30 by 30, so 30% by 2030. How does that tie in with our other conventional or thermal-based power plant generation, and how will renewable actually displace some of it, how will it tie in with it? Because renewable is only as good as long as it's available. You know, there's a huge question mark on availability, efficiency as well. So we need to bear in mind, we need to bear that in mind. And there's one other thing that I just want to touch upon that always gets sort of lost in these conversations, which is the experience curve. The experience curve is basically that it states that the more we do something, the better we get at it. But the first time we do it, the cost is always a lot higher. So the more we do it, the better we're going to get it, the cheaper it's going to become years down the line. And that's what we're seeing with renewables as well. So if you look at some of the solar projects or wind projects that were set up years ago, they were a lot more expensive. Now the tariffs have come down significantly. So that must also always be important.
Just want to add a supplementary aspect to it before you respond. You know, this whole way forward on the trade-off between the renewables and the existing sources of energy that we use, the fuel, the coal, and hydro. I mean, hydro is also renewables, but I'm talking about solar and wind. Now, assuming that the solar, you know, can be made, let's say, at 2 or 3 cents, and if our power generation on the basis of our existing from some of the other sources, or even we are going in a big way on LNG now, or LNG, and of course imported coal and other sources. So there could be one thinking that if you have invested or if you have plants that are generating, the generation cost is, let's say, 10 cents, or even the fuel cost is, say, 5 cents, and if you can get the energy in future at 2 cents, why not just scrap that is the sunk cost? What do you say to that? Because otherwise, you end up, you know, the other approach could be that even if the renewable energy cost is 2 cents, because I have existing plants generating, I've already invested, I will not go towards that. Is there any thinking to do an objective analysis of that?
So, I mean, you know, we talk about renewables and we talk about how we mismanage, or, I mean, you know, there's a perception that we did not focus on renewables over the last 5 years. But if we look at the projects which were coming online in the last 5 years, the tariff was 16 cents for a solar project. Then it came down to 11 cents. There are projects which are operating today at 11 cents. There are wind projects, everybody which is operational, which is about 1,000 megawatts, 15 cents. It's more expensive than any RFO plant existing in the system because you have to pay capacity payment regardless they do. But as Shaharyar mentioned, the experience curve or the prices came down, I mean, you know, rapidly over the last 2 years. Now we are hearing 4 cents in Pakistan, but the government isn't. So I think the lesson here is that what we missed in the previous part is at the same time we are committed 2047 to pay capacity payments. So any project that comes online of coal today has a 30-year capacity payment commitment on that part, right? So even if you were to retire all 2002 policy, which will expire in 2037 or 2030s, you still have that thing. So what we need to do is do a better planning. So we need to introduce competitive market, because if you look at people today, everybody as an individual is making a choice that I might want to put up a rooftop solar if it displaces even 20% of my load, right? So as a grid, as a central planning, we need to really think about it, how we can. This is a really good idea that people have talked about it, because the solar and the wind is so cheap, and the battery prices are expected to follow suit because now everybody is focused onto it. So what we look at is that you could displace the furnace oil or all these capacity payments with these renewables, and the cost that you will pay as a capacity charge will, even if it added, will bring down the grid. But let me leave a thought while we talk about excess capacity or anything. One thing that has not been, and I'd like to introduce this in our discussion, is a revolution happening onto the transport sector, which is the 35% consumer of fossil fuel. While we focus onto our fossil fuels as a country, if we were to shift transport sector, which is happening very rapidly, if I don't know if anybody missed that Amazon invested hundreds of millions of dollars of buying battery operated Rivian vehicle. There are people who are talking about replacing the metros or the buses because they run on a similar route. So there is a, particularly you could put the charging stations or battery stations. And if that happens, actually all this capacity could be mopped up. So you would not see a Shell fuel station, you might see a Hubco charging station as well, right? So one of the things which would also happen over the next 10 years, EVs is going to increase the grid. So while we might actually look at this fossil fuel or the renewables, so 30 by 30 is a good vision, but I think the focus has to be on the planning part, that how we...
So, talking about tying renewables, and I'm going to be an advocate of renewables over here. Study was commissioned by World Bank, and it's going to be concluded next month. Looking at the target of this 30 by 30 of the government. So what they found in their projections was that with all this renewable coming in, and the prices of, as the two speakers before me have talked about, that the prices have come down significantly. With all this renewable added, which is around 11, if you want to achieve that target, that means 1,000 megawatt every year. That means 10,000, 11,000 megawatts of renewables by 2030. The net present value of the cost is actually going to be less with renewables because of the fuel cost that you're displacing. So while we cannot do anything about all the capacity that's coming in, I mean, these are power purchase agreements that you've signed with IPPs, you can't scrap them. But still, even if you don't operate them, even if you're still paying the capacity charges, but the fuel cost that you displace with the solar and wind is actually going to give you a positive net present value. And Kamran might disagree with me on this. Your question on industrial consumers, I mean, I don't have a short-term solution for them. Sorry, the rate, electricity tariff is going to be high for them in the short term. In the long term, yes, we're working on reducing the electricity cost of generation with renewables and with hydro. The one we always talk about supply side, but we forget the demand side. There've been energy efficiencies like the stepchild of the power sector. I mean, in this country, it has been ignored. Everybody keeps on, all the government, previous parties have come into power. They've always talked about supply, and yes, we had this supply side problem where we had 7,000, 8,000 megawatt of shortfall. Now that we're surplus capacity, we need to think about the energy consumption as well. So, I mean, there've been various studies. And in the industry, there are about 4,000 gigawatt hours of electricity or energy that can be saved through various energy efficiency measures. And as everyone says, like the amount of money that's required to produce 1 megawatt of energy is more expensive than the amount required to save 1 megawatt. So in the short term, there is some respite for industrial consumers because, I mean, if you compare what other countries are doing in terms of energy efficiency, we're much, much behind. I mean, between 2006 and 2014, the amount of energy that China saved, it was equivalent to the amount of renewable energy that was added. In Pakistan, I don't think we really, I mean, there are few industries that have, bigger industries probably would have implemented energy management system or are energy efficient, but we have these big cluster of SMEs which are energy inefficient. So I think there's some respite for industries.
Yeah, very interesting point, Saadia, you have raised, but the issue is that I mean, the idea of saving energy by the industries and also by other consumers, I foresee it will happen. But that will further compound the problem of the government because the capacity will still be there and that still has to be paid. Because, I mean, the thoughts are, people are thinking that why not cement, which consumes a lot of electricity. If you have land available, you just go and invest in solar generation or wind generation or a combination of that. And that I'm sure many of the industries are already doing and they will do. And that is also happening to a normal consumer. Solarization is happening, I think, at a great pace in Pakistan. So part of the problem is that not only our growth projections have gone wrong, But the growth of electricity demand have also gone wrong, because a lot of consumers, because of load shedding also, have substituted part of their requirements to the renewables, to the solar, and that is going to escalate. So, and that again, and I know this is an issue that we can't solve, but the point is that huge commitments that the government has done with the investment in the power generation is going to haunt us more, I think, as we go along. But anyway.
So let me just interject. I mean, it's a great thought to have as an energy efficiency, but if you think about it, that we have a consumer interest at one hand, and then also the commitments that we've made. So, and we believe the consumer is rational and makes an economic choice. So if there is a benefit that they see in efficiency, but as Asad pointed it out, the less consumption will actually exacerbate the situation for the consumer, because if you are producing 1,000 units and you can only sell 600, you have to pay for 1,000 units. And while we keep hearing about 2 cents per kilowatt hour cost of solar in the world around us, the problem is that the debt tenor is a lot higher and people get paid. I mean, we don't get paid for 7 months or 8 months. And as we look at today, I mean, the circular debt has actually become such a binding constraint onto anybody in the sector, whether you are an oil refinery, whether you are a power producer, because I think we need to address this issue. Only renewables and the policy foresees that it'll be competitive bidding. So you have to actually, there'll be no guaranteed return, whatever you think about it, and people have already gone down to a return which is 10 to 12%. But if our ability to do not pay on time remains, then all these people, a competitive bidding does not yield the best results. And we've seen it in Pakistan and examples around the world as well. So the investor will build in that risk and premium might go up. So you might not see actually 4.5 cents tariff of solar. You might see 5.5 cents because he would actually do that. So I think there are some things, and as we don't have someone to address that until or unless we have some of the governance or the policy issues or the payment and we are comparable to other economies, we won't see 2 cents of solar. So while you read this headline, I can assure you today, there's not a single investor in the world who would come to this country and say, I will provide you a solar at 2 cents, because if you're not going to pay it for 1 year, trust me, no banker is going to give him a single dime because he needs the money back as well.
Can I just, so just to add on to what Kamran is saying and to just touch upon the demand-supply issue. You know, yes, there's a lot of talk about whether demand will be there, whether supply will be there. Well, supply is there, but will it be matching the demand or not? There was a study done in 2018, and it showed that more than 47% of the population of Pakistan is still without access to electricity. 47%. So just imagine if 10% or 20% of that population is actually connected to the grid. What will that do to your demand? Right? And then when we look at the future as well, you have concepts like 5G coming in, or you have AI, or you have cryptocurrency, for which you have mining going on, and all of these things which are technology based, they demand huge amounts of electricity. Pakistan is not even scratching the surface when it comes to these things. When you actually start getting into this, your energy demand will go through the roof. And for a country like us, we cannot afford to go back to the situation like it was in the 80s and 90s, where we're trying to play catch up again, because the world will not be forgiving.
I mean, Pakistan has had, exactly what Shaharyar is saying. Pakistan has had boom and bust cycles. If you look at growth rate for the last 40 years, it's around 5%. Even though a growth rate projected for last year and projected for these 2 years 2%, it's going to grow again. And there's some projections done by JICA and other counterparts. If you do not do anything about our demand, energy efficiency, everyone talks about that if we reduce our energy consumption, that's going to put more burden. The demand will grow. If not in the next 2 years, it will grow in the next 3 years. If you have electric vehicles, you can use that capacity for that. I don't see. I think we need to work on our energy consumption today. We need to create 40, 50 million people who are not connected to the grid today. If there are, electricity consumption is going to go up. It's not going down. So our capacity, and then Shaharyar was earlier talking about all this capacity that's going to, all these IPPs that are retiring, these inefficient GenCos that can be retired. So in 5 years, I don't see this as a surplus capacity.
Okay, I think the hope is, before I open up for the audience, as Saadia said, our hope is that the current situation of low demand will not continue, and hopefully our economic growth, based on the current IMF program, and after we achieve some stabilization, we will have more momentum, and the growth will revive, and we'll have more demand, and hopefully we are. But two aspects I think we could not touch, which I think we'll have to solve, is this 18–19% of distribution losses, which remain very high, the very inefficient transmission and distribution system, which in my personal judgment, I think the market that Kamran was talking about can only be created when you have these in private sector, and the government actually has an efficient and effective regulator. So unfortunately, our regulatory system has not been very efficient. Our policy framework has not delivered, and the government, instead of doing its own job, has gone into various kinds of businesses which it has not been able to manage. So with that thought, I'll open it for the audience. If there are any questions, please identify yourself, and I would request that, because we have very short time, just raise a question. We don't have time for any speeches, further speeches. Thank you.
Please raise your hand or up mic.
My name is Sarmat. My question to representative of the World Bank is, in many developed countries like Singapore, there is electricity production from the garbage, like you produce methane or other gases and then run the turbines on that. So in the World Bank, it is overlooking any such policy, or it is advising to the government to focus generation of electricity from the garbage because the raw material is abundant and sustainable?
No, not at the moment. I think the way World Bank works is that we have to get the request from the government, and I don't know if the government is looking at it. But with I think biogas plants, the problem is of supply chain, and that's what the government needs to address and actually think about.
So just to add to what Saadia just said, I think you raised a very good point on waste. It's called waste to energy projects. That's something that HUBCO has actually looked at, and one of the things that we always talk about is that we'll produce electricity from the waste. Actually, those projects that you talk about in Singapore and in other countries as well, they're actually, the prime objective of those plants is to actually incinerate the garbage in a controlled environment. Or in a comparatively environmentally friendly and a byproduct is production of electricity. It is something that that we're looking at. There are supply chain issues that need to be looked at and need to be seriously considered. And again, it's a real question of policy and planning on the government side as well.
I'll just add a very short thing that while all these scavengers, we are actually a much more efficient recycler of the waste than all these countries, because we have, unfortunately, this you see as a scavenging as a very, very low thing. But if you go to all these garbage dumps, all the high energy waste is actually separated and reused as well. So there are issues on the supply chain. Otherwise, as a technology, everything is established.
But on the policy side, just to add very briefly, I think NEPRA, the government a few years back had announced a policy and allocated 50 megawatts each for waste to power, for each province. And cities like Karachi, I think there is huge amount of waste, and it's a very valid point. We should have, I think there should have been investment and waste to energy for large cities who don't know what to do with the waste. It would have been very, very productive, and I understand
UPCO is working on it, but somehow we have not been able to materialize this. The policy is there, but the implementation is lagged behind. I think I'll not go into too many details of this, but this is one area which needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Hello,
Hello.
this is...
I'm Faisal Siddiqui. What I've understood from the earlier part of this discussion is that we have excess electricity. So while we need perhaps energy experts who would be dwelling upon this thing, my thinking would be that perhaps this message is absolutely lost in all this communication, and perhaps you need communication experts as well who should get this message across that there is excess electricity, but it is not being perhaps put to good use. Any of you can respond to it, please.
So one thing that the government needs to do is that over the last few years, the interruptions actually got industrialists off the grid. So there is about 3,000 megawatts which is being produced in not so efficient plants based on gas. So now the government is importing RLNG. So if they were to rationalize somehow and guarantee them the sustainable or uninterrupted power, they will come back to the grid, because any industrialist is making an economic decision. And if government feels that by paying extra, if I were to give them a discount or somehow encourage them to come onto the grid, that could be done. But for that, you have to ensure uninterrupted power, because a lot of these industrialists are looking at uninterrupted power, because if it is interrupted and it's cheaper, it's actually more expensive because there are production losses and everything else. So there is some dots to be connected, and hopefully focus will shift towards that now that we have a problem of excess generation. So we...
Any of the industrial feeders now have load shedding. I think they're getting uninterrupted. It's the problem, the cost of electricity is quite high for the industrial consumers. I think that's what the government needs to work on, and actually giving them reliable and competitive electricity.
Hi, this is Ashfaq. My question is to Mr. Kamran. You said two things. One is the more reliance of Pakistan in the future on the domestic resources, especially the third coal. The question is, how do you see more reliance on third coal in view of climate change threats to Pakistan as one of the most vulnerable countries on the list? And secondly, you mentioned the planning aspect in a stage of power sector, whether it's demand or governance or supply. So what are the key ingredients or tools that would be required for such a holistic planning on covering all aspects?
So vulnerability, first of all, we need to understand is not because of our emissions or our climate change actions or lack thereof. It's because of a global that we live in a room. So whether you are doing it, polluting it more or not, because you're vulnerable because of your poverty, right? So even if you were to import, if you were not to use coal, you were to import fuel, and your the balance of payment crisis actually affects you in another way as well. So, that's one thing. The other is that there was a recent study, I was just flipping through the papers, John Hopkins did, that for developing countries to end hunger, they will have to increase their carbon footprint. Now, it could be looked at deforestation to do more, agriculture, it could be to do development. What we need to care for is that our footprint of carbon footprint at this point in time is 0.6% of our GDP, and India is 1.6, and the developed countries are in the double figures, right? So if we are only focusing on bringing future thermal generation through coal, it's actually indigenization of your fuel sources. It is displacing RFO as well. It is displacing, and then we are doing 30 by 30. So it's like, I give an example of, you cannot have a kitchen without a sugar or a salt just because you can't have it. So you need everything, a bit of it, so in moderation. If you were to look at a 2050 plan of the country, I think the only fuel we actually rely on, a thermal fuel, is going to be coal, which needs to be developed. We will use this coal in multiple ways once we've done the power generation. 10 years ago when I started working on it, Asad knows that everybody used to say there's high sulfur, it can't be controlled. Now that we have an execution, all those naysayers are saying, okay, why coal? Now the question is coming to that. So I think we will go to the second level where we would be using in a chemical industry, all the energy intensive industries could be dependent onto that. And then rest of it could be on a clean power and efficiency, and all those things can be done. because we do need manufacturing, and if we were to shift manufacturing to charcoal or anything of that, the carbon footprint overall would reduce as well. In terms of the integrated planning, it goes back to the same thing, that now we are only talking about renewables and renewables and renewables, but we need to think about that what we have today and how we need to look into the future, what the demand is going to be. Are we going to be displacing transportation with electric vehicles? How that grid needs to be planned? Should we be able to waste this much energy as we are doing? The losses which have not been brought down, and I think I partly make responsibility of the NEPRA as well. So if you think that we are going to tomorrow wake up and be aligned to the global benchmarks, which people keep focusing about, the regional losses are in 12%. I mean, all of us as human beings, we know that we are not the most disciplined or civilized nation. So you can't expect us on one aspect, well, we don't pay taxes, but on an energy payment, we will be 100% payment. And NEPRA thinks that we are going to use this benchmark and impose onto Pakistan while we have one of the lowest tax to GDP ratio. So I think the part of the things is that the integrated planning has to be, everybody needs to look at the local scenario, context, and then plan, right? So you can't have on one end a very, very strict benchmark of T&D losses, then all of a sudden 30-30 renewables. So you have to look at everything, and all the stakeholders have to sit together and think where we are going. So that's a part.
Sorry, there's nobody from NEPRA, so I'm going to advocate for NEPRA. So regional losses 12%, and what NEPRA allows is 15%. It's still higher than the region. And it's playing its role as a regulator. I mean, it's not going to allow for inefficiency of the discos, because eventually the customer has to pay, right? But yes, I mean, discos, there's so much that needs to be done on distribution side, because otherwise we'll just keep on paying.
Only point that you have to consider is that both regulator and the discos are in the public sector, which is the big problem. I think finally I would say, before we are coming to the close of this session, I personally think, don't have too much time to summarize this, but one of the biggest issue in Pakistan has been that we have too much government, too big government, and our cost of doing business has gone up. Our ease of doing business is in a pathetic shape. So what we need to do is we have to have less government, less regulation, less taxation, and less litigation. Then and only then the innovation will come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for attending this session, and thank you to the moderator and the participants.